That's it.
That's about all they do right now, isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah,
I thank God she's healthy, as far as we know. Beautiful. We got took right ahead of her.
Yeah.
She sure really did. She would. We must start out tonight with prayer requests.
remember my kids
Absolutely.
and remember me. I always need your prayers.
Remember Sister Liz from her home.
Remember Jackie too. She's supposed to have a couple of more treatments.
Remember Karen and Harry.
The only thing we know about Karen is how that's gonna work.
They said she was going to be in pain for a while, and then it's supposed to work. I don't know. And I think Harry had another shot today in his knee. I think.
Is there anyone else?
And mom and dad, see, it's my brother-in-law. All these that work with. Here I am, I had one aggravating me today. I was leaving. He said, cutting her little green, ain't you? I said, yep, going home, clean up, going to church. I said, good excuse anyhow. He said, well, I guess. He walked behind the building, come out before I got to the gate, hollered, and he said, pray for me.
Praise the Lord. Really don't.
Remember Becky, her aunt passed away.
Is there anyone else?
Continue to remember Peggy and Connie and Diane, and the lady down back from me asked if we would put her two brothers on the prayer. They're both having some medical issues and things, and she said, and I don't know that they're saved, I don't know anything about them, I just know that she asked if we cared, if I cared to ask if we would put them on her prayer chain.
Absolutely.
She told me their names, but I forgot them.
God knows.
That's what you get when you get old.
If you're working around with my sister Brenda, I had a hard time there. Charles died.
You kidding?
No, passed away. It was past weekend, I think.
I've never seen that.
Well, they had his obituary in the green paper. Losing it mentally, so I don't know what took him out. But anyone else?
Yes, I remember my mom. Didn't do nothing about that. Really fall.
Brother Judy, also to Wood. But that went out too sharp, probably a week, so. Not the best. Anyone else? Anyone else? Everybody like to come around?
Father, we love you.
Let them say, Roger, thank the Lord for all he does for me. So I'm worthy.
For all unworthy, Lord. If you would turn to 1 Samuel 25, and verse 35. 1 Samuel 25 and verse 35. And, Abigail, if you remember, she had given food to David and his men, and her husband Nabal, he refused. And now we're going to look at the times when you don't show mercy to God's own anointing, what can happen. Verse 35, 1 Samuel 25, 35. So David received of her
25 and 35.
1 Samuel 25 and verse 35. So David received of her hand that which she had brought him, and said unto her, Go up in peace to thine house. See, I have hearkened to thy voice, and have accepted thy person. And Abigail came to Nabal, and behold, he held a feast in his house, like the feast of a king. And Nabal's heart was merry within him, for he was very drunken. Wherefore she told him nothing, less or more, until the morning. But it came to pass in the morning, when the wine was gone out of Nabal, and his wife had told him these things, that his heart died within him, and he became as a stone. In verse 38, and it came to pass about 10 days after that the Lord smote Nabal, that he died. So it seems like he may have had a stroke, something like that, only God knows, but he wouldn't have show mercy, so he received no mercy. So after a night of sumptuous living, and he had very much goods, and David in his time of distress, I truly believe that this man would have helped David and his men. I think God, I can't speak for God, but I believe his days would have been lengthened. And if he was still alive when David became king, I think David would have said, bring him forth, for great honor. The king could do as he wished of him. So, reading from verse 39 to the rest of the chapter, it says, And when David heard that Nabal was dead, he said, Blessed be the Lord, that he hath pleaded the cause of my reproach from the hand of Nabal, and hath kept his servant from evil. For the Lord hath returned the wickedness of Nabal upon his own head. And David sent and communed with Abigail to take her to him to wife. And when the servants of David were come to Abigail to Carmel, they spake unto her, saying, David sent us unto thee to take thee to him to wife. She didn't hesitate, and she arose and bowed herself on her face to the earth, and said, Behold, let thine handmaid be a servant to wash the feet of the servants of my Lord. And Abigail hasted and arose and rode upon an ass with 5 damsels of hers that went after her. So she was a woman of great wealth. And she went after the messengers of David and became his wife. David also took Ahinoam of Jezreel, and they were also both of them his wives. But Saul had given Michal, his daughter, David's wife, to Phalti, the son of Laish, which was of Galim. So for that verse 39 through 44 here in my study Bible, it says something real quick. It says, because David recognized that Abigail was a godly and wise woman, and because a marriage to a prominent Calebite would be advantageous to his future position as king in Judah, David took Abigail as wife soon after Nabal's death. significantly, David would first become king of Judah at Hebron. Despite its political expediency, David's polygamous marriages are not commended by the scriptures. David just had a lust for women. He loved them. He just loved women. And was that one of his downfalls? Well, it sure did cost him a lot with his children, because he spent so much time with his wives and his concubines when he wasn't at war. So it did cost him. It did cost him. God's always had a plan for a man and a woman. And I've heard people say there's nobody out there for me. If I believe you're a child of God, God has someone out there for you. It's all in God's time. And a lot of people have rushed and gotten married and not sought the face of God, and it's been a struggle. And a lot of marriages fail because God's not in it. And you can marry the wrong person. Honestly, you can marry the wrong person. So, looking at chapter 26 and verse 1, and the Ziphites came unto Saul to Gibeah, saying, Did not David hide himself in the hill of Hachilah, which is before Jeshimon? So it says some critics have suggested that chapters 24 and 26 are duplicates accounts of one event in which David spared Saul's life. But the details of the two accounts are far too different to be considered variants of one occurrence. So as we read on, and I cross-reference a lot of that, it is not the same thing, which we could go in time with that to show that it is not the same happening that occurred as what some would say. And in verse 2, then Saul arose and went down to the wilderness at the stinking said at Ziph, having 3,000 chosen men of Israel with him, to seek David in the wilderness of Ziph. And Saul pitched in the hill of Hachilah, which is before Joshua, by the way. But David abode in the wilderness, and he saw that Saul came after him into the wilderness. In my mind, I would be thinking as David, when's this going to end? After a point, it almost goes beyond the game of cat and mouse, because you've got valiant men with you. And you'd have to be thinking, I have all these men with me, are they going to break ranks with me at some point and say, we've had enough? Maybe you're not the chosen one to be king. Why are you always on the run? And why are we going to risk our lives for you? But they stood firm with it. They stood firm even in the times of hunger, sickness, being away from their loved ones. They stood right by David. And he never forgot. He never forgot these men. And many of them spilled their blood to see all these things come to fruition. And they have great reward. I truly believe that. In verse 4, David therefore sent out spies and understood that Saul was come in very deed. He was indeed, he's coming. And David arose and came to the place where Saul had pitched. And David beheld the place where Saul lay, and Abner the son of Ner, the captain of his host, and Saul lay in the trench. So he laid in the camp, and the people pitched round about him. So they're all round about him for protection for the king. Then answered David and said to Ahimelech the Hittite, and to Abishai the son of Zeruiah, brother of Joab, saying, Who will go down with me to Saul to the camp? And Abishai said, I will go down with thee. And I seen hesitation where he said, I'll go down with you. I'm going to go down with you. That's some bravery right there. You got to think, David and him. And how many men? You've got all these accomplished around him. It said how many thousand there, and I've already forgot.
3,000.
3,000. But one guy says, I'll go with you. Now that is faith in God, faith in David, that God's protecting him to say, I'll go with you because I know you're going to be king. I know you are, and I'm going to give my life for you. If you go down, I want to go down with you. No question asked. But I think the man had enough faith to sit there and say, I know you're God's chosen. And you're not going to die. You're not going to die. See, it says in verse 7, so David and Abishai came to the people by night, and behold, Saul lay sleeping within the trench, and his spear stuck in the ground at his bolster, but Abner and the people lay round about him. So that word bolster right there, at his head, where you can get to it, stuck right in the ground where you can grab it quickly. And then said Abishai to David, God hath delivered thine enemy into thine hand this day. Now therefore let me smite him, I pray thee, with the spear even to the earth at once, and I will not smite him the second time. Would that not have aroused those around him? It sounds kind of like old Peter, doesn't it? With that boldness to say, I'll die right here in the spot, Lord. You don't have to worry about any of this stuff. So he's delivered you God's delivered him into thy hand. But look what David said. David said to Abishai, destroy him not. For who can stretch forth his hand against the Lord's anointed and be guiltless? So I was looking at that verse 7. Some of y'all got the same study Bible. At verse 7, Saul regularly kept his spear stuck in the ground by his head, which symbolized his royal authority. David first took the king's spear, then returned it in deference to the will of God. Once again, he respected duly established government and spared the king's life. So that was a royal authority, but also he could get to it real quickly. So it was a royal symbol when you saw that in the ground. Here he is. He's right over here. Our king. Verse 10, David said, furthermore, as the Lord liveth, the Lord shall smite him. For his day shall come to die, or he shall descend into battle and perish. Well, that last part he said, he shall descend into battle to perish. I don't know if David could even know how true that was going to be. I don't know if he even could think, but it had to be something to befall. And in verse 11, the Lord forbid that I should stretch forth mine hand against the Lord's anointed, but I pray thee, take down now the spear that is at his bolster, and the cruse of water, and let us go. Now there's a deep sleep over this whole encampment of men, these great warriors. God put a sleep over them that was so deep, I think you could have run a horn right then it wasn't awoken. So he got the bolster and the cruse of water. He said, let us go. So David took the spear and the cruse of water from Saul's bolster, and they gat them away, and no man saw it, nor knew it, neither awake. For they were all asleep, because a deep sleep from the Lord was fallen upon them. And as I reread some of this today, it was just like when old Peter was in prison. And what happened is a deep sleep there, and the angel said, get up, come on, it's time to go. And Peter, maybe in darkness, he thought, somebody's going to hear. So he's like, no, come on, you got to come now. In verse 13, then David went over to the other side and stood on the top of the hill afar off, a great space being between them. And David cried to the people and to Abner the son of Ner, saying, answerest thou not, Abner? Then Abner answered and said, who art thou that criest to the king? And David said to Abner, art not thou a valiant man? And who is like to thee in Israel? Wherefore then hast thou not kept the Lord thy thy lord the king? For there came one of the people and destroyed the king thy lord. This thing is not good that thou hast done. As the Lord liveth, ye are worthy to die, because ye have not kept your master, the Lord's anointed. And now see where the king's spear is, and the cruse of water that was at his bolster. You know what? That's more than just being court-martialed. That's more than being court-martialed. You know, many years ago, if you fell asleep on guard duty, what could happen to you? I mean, in certain situations, you could be more than court-martialed. I mean, it was very serious, especially at some of our top secret places, especially, whether it be nuclear facilities or whatever. When you're sitting there and you said you're to watch, you're to stay awake. But God had sent this great sleep. And he asked him, he said, or he told him, he said, you are worthy to die. You have not kept your master, the Lord's anointed. And now see where is the king's spear and the cruse of water. In verse 17, David pleads with Saul. And Saul knew David's voice and said, is this thy voice, my son David? And David said, it is my voice, my Lord, O king. How many people do you know who wouldn't be cussing King Saul? I mean, honestly, you've been through all this, so tired, so hungry, from cave to cave. I mean, I can see this in my mind of all this. You can only momentarily imagine it. But in that area is a rough place, especially if somebody was after you. Hot, cold of the nights. Who's going to go out and hunt when you got all these observers who will tell on you in just a second? We know where David is. There was money on his head. Put the money on his head. Verse 18, he said, wherefore doth my Lord thus pursue after his servant? For what have I done? Or what evil is in mine hand? You remember he had asked Saul this before. Now therefore I pray thee, let my Lord the king hear the words of his servant. If the Lord hath stirred thee up against me, let him accept an offering. But if they be the children of men, cursed be they before the Lord, for they have driven me out this day from abiding in the inheritance of the Lord, saying, go serve other gods. Now therefore, let not my blood fall to the earth before the face of the Lord, for the king of Israel is come out to see a flea, as when one doth hunt a partridge in the mountains. He's saying, Saul, you are so great, and you chase after me, one who used to keep the sheep. One who used to keep the sheep. You remember the first time when Saul actually became so jealous was before he even killed Goliath. See, it seemed all good to sit there and say, here, take this, and go fight. Take all this heavy warrior's gear. But after it took place, that's when it really hit. I think he was already, God had allowed that evil spirit to come upon Saul as he was walking down there to rebuke Goliath. I really do. Verse 21, then said Saul, here we got Saul again. He's going to acknowledge his sin, and he keeps going back from this mindset to say, forgive me, David, forgive me, God. Then it changes many times. Then said Saul, I have sinned. Return my son David, for I will no more do thee harm, because my soul is precious in thine eyes this day. Behold, I have played the fool and have erred exceedingly. And David answered and said, behold, the king's spear, and let one of the young men come over and fetch him. The Lord render to every man his righteous and his faithfulness, for the Lord delivered thee into my hand today, that I would not stretch forth my hand against the Lord's anointed. You know what? The people of Israel, did they not choose Saul? They chose him, didn't they? And it's one way to look at it and say, he wasn't the Lord's anointed. God allowed him to take that position. God allowed him to become king, yet he told Israel, you're going to get what you're going to get. You're not going to truly like it. You'll like it at times, but it's not the one I want for you. And it says, verse 24, and behold, as thy life was much set by this day in thine eyes, so let my life be much set by in the eyes of the Lord, and let him deliver me out of all tribulation. Then Saul said to David, blessed be thou, my son David. Thou shalt both do great things, and also shalt thou still prevail. So David went on his way, and Saul returned to his place. It didn't say right then that David went with him, did it? Would you have trusted Saul, even though Saul said these things? You ever have somebody repeatedly lie to you, and then they'll look at you and say, I promise you, I'm not lying to you. Automatically, it goes back to where you say, I don't know if I can believe this person. I really don't. There's a man that I won't dare mention his name. He lied so much all through his life. Even when I still see him now, when he tells me something, I still in my mind, I think, I wonder if he's telling me the truth. That's how far it went for so many decades to where even if I don't see him in a long time, I'm still at that point of saying, I don't know if he's telling me the truth or not. And if that be between him and God, the way I look at it, he's not telling the truth. So now we look at chapter 27. Man, how do you all really feel? Ask a quick question about, I mean, as human beings, you get used so much. How could you sit there and bless somebody that uses you? And the Bible tells us over and over to bless those that despitefully use you. And even as slaves, pray for your masters and obey what they say. That's hard to do when somebody is a master has beat you to a pulp, striped you, you're bleeding, and then all of a sudden you have to think back to the Lord's word and say, God bless him, and pray. That's a hard thing to do. That'd be a hard thing to do.
It's a close walk, but
Yeah. You know, I talked to a man I met a few weeks ago, a black man, and we had so much in common. And we got to talking about slavery and everything. And I was amazed at the first thing he said, which blew my mind. He said, there's been slaves. He said, I've done a lot of research on this. And he said, there's been slavery since just after the time of mankind's creation. He said, it didn't take a stronger man at one point to say, you're weaker than I am, you're going to do my bidding. And he said, I've done a lot of thinking about this. He said, you as a white man, he said, how can you look at what your people did before and me look at you and say, you're to blame? I said, well, I know. He said, all these things that you hear that one color hates the other, and when that people want division, he said, I don't hate you. I said, well, I don't hate you either. And he said, I did a lot of studying. He said, my own people in Africa sold my own people to the whites for profit. He said, people don't even realize that. And I said, well, I know a lot of bad things have been done to the Indians, to the blacks. I said, I understand that. He said, you don't have to think nothing about that. He said, you didn't do it. And it was eye-opening to me because the media and everyone else not getting into internet and all that, they want us to have a mindset of this group hates us. Or they want it to look like we hate them. Division. That's what Satan wants, is constant division. You know, he'd be just as happy for a complete civil war. A complete civil war. You see, that's what Satan did. He was the highest angel. He was number one. And all of a sudden, he said, Civil War, third of the angels, he said, I tell you what, I would outdo, outdo God. You'll just join me. You'll see. Went from angels of beauty to what are they now? You know, God's going to separate the goats from the sheep. Now, that includes the angels, those fallen angels. Where do they get put to? Lake of fire. So, everybody thinks that just means the lost and the saved with sheep. No, it also includes fallen angels, the demons. So, but it was eye-opening to me to talk to this man, and we talked for a long time, long time, and he was actually from California. And he said, let me tell you something. He said, everybody in California ain't liberal like what people might think. He said, we're not all liberal. And he said, we got to talking about the Lord. He'd sit there and say, you're right. And he'd say something, I'd be like, that's what the Bible said. And we got saying, you know, it ain't really a matter of who you think's right. That's what it does say, the Word of God. It was just refreshing. It was really refreshing. It was fabulous. I think I'm in chapter 27. David said in his heart, I shall not perish one day by the hand of Saul. Now here he is, getting down on himself. Here David's living among the Philistines. And this is, look at verse 25. He said, so David went on his way and Saul returned to his place. And I don't know the matter of time that this went in between where Saul returned to his place, David went on his way. The Bible doesn't tell me, and I didn't search it hard enough. The Chronicles, I apologize, and over in Kings. But here is David lives among the Philistines. David said in his heart, I shall now perish one day by the hand of Saul. There is nothing better for me than that I should speedily escape into the land of the Philistines, and Saul shall despair of me. What's that word, despair? He's going to quit searching for me. No longer. He just forget about it. To seek me any more in any coast of Israel or any place, so shall I escape out of his hand. And David arose and he passed over with the 600 men that were with him unto Achish, the son of Moab, king of Gath. And David dwelt with Achish at Gath in his men, every man with his household, even David with his 2 wives, Abinoam the Jezreelitess, and Abigail the Carmelitess, Nabal's wife. And it was told Saul that David was fled to Gath, and he sought no more again for him. He just said, he's out of my hair, it's all good, not worry about it for right now. You know, even what looks like the worst of the situation, David's going to learn a lot down here where he's at. He's going to learn a whole lot. And here it is, Achish gives David Ziklag. And in verse 5, and David said unto Achish, if I have now found grace in thine eyes, let them give me a place in some town in the country, that I may dwell there. For why should thy servant dwell in the royal city with thee? So he's making what is a friendship here. Is it a wise one or is it unwise? Well, we read on and it says, then Achish gave him Ziklag that day, wherefore Ziklag pertaineth unto the kings of Judah unto this day. And the time that David dwelt in the country of the Philistines was a full year and 4 months. That's a pretty good span of time, 16 months. David and his men went up and invaded the Geshurites and the Gezrites and the Amalekites, for those nations were the old inhabitants of the land, as thou goest ashore, even unto the land of Egypt. I wonder if that's on that book you bought, Steve. It's got all the timeline. It should be. You don't have to get it right now. I'm just That just popped in my mind. And it said, I'll go ahead and read it, Steve, if that's all right. In verse 9, and David smote the land. Now, these are things that Saul should have taken care of many, many instances, and it falls in the lap of somebody else. And David smote the land, and that's kind of like, without a penny, that's kind of like what happened all last week. The things didn't get done, so Monday through today, everything's been put on her plate of what didn't get done in the past week. We're sorry, but you take care of it. You take care of it. Let's see what, verse 8. David smote the land, verse 9, and left neither man nor woman alive, and took away the sheep and the oxen, the asses and the camels, and the apparel, and returned and came to Achish. And Achish said, whither have you made a road today? And David said, against the south of Judah, against the south of the Jerahmeelites, and against the south of the Kenites. And David saved neither man nor woman alive, to bring tidings to Gad, saying, lest they should tell on us, saying, so did David, and so will be his manner all the while he dwelleth in the country of the Philistines. And Achish believed David, saying, he hath made his people Israel utterly to abhor him, therefore he shall be my servant forever. So he's saying, I got David right where I want him. He's going to be my servant now. And for verse 12, a little annotation here said, David pretended allegiance to Achish while fighting the enemies of Judah. The time spent in Ziklag would give him valuable military and diplomatic experience for the time when he would become king. It would also increase the number of his forces. Like I said, he's learning. He's learning on the job, and he's learning quick. So what seems like he's going against the will of God, to sit there and say, they're thinking he's on our side now. Very diplomatic. Now, isn't it the game of countries to do this? Even today, it's happening every day. You're our ally. You come to find out, that's a hard thing in the Middle East that our country never figures out. It's hard to make allies with people that, let's say, live in villages. They're not united as a country. And it's more as villages. Does that make sense? And when you think that they're an ally with you, to spare themselves, they'll just go back to their villages. They can't understand diplomacy, so many of them, and they can't understand democracy. See, our country thinks everybody should understand and want democracy. That's not the case it is. We're so blessed to have democracy. We're so blessed to have our freedom. And look at all that our forefathers here go through. I mean, this is a case where we can say, a lot of people say that had nothing to do with your bloodline. Oh yeah, from Adam came all the bloodlines to us. I mean, so verse 28, or chapter 28, 1, maybe you need that with Steve?
No, I didn't see it back there.
Okay.
I did.
Oh, that's no problem.
Anyway,
So chapter 28, verse 1, the Philistines assembled against Israel. Now this is a place where David, he's going, is he going to go against his own countrymen, his own brothers and sisters? It came to pass in those days that the Philistines gathered their armies together for warfare to fight with Israel. And Achish said unto David, now thou assuredly, know thou assuredly that thou shalt go out with me to battle, thou and thy men. And David said to Achish, surely thou shalt know that thy servant can move. And Achish said to David, therefore will I make thee keeper of thine head forever. That's one of his chief guardians. Now Samuel was dead, and all Israel had lamented him, and buried him in Ramah. It says, even in his own city, and Saul had put away those that had familiar spirits and wizards out of the land. And what's those familiar spirits? That is mediums and spiritualists. Verse 4, and the Philistines gathered themselves together and came and pitched in Shunem. And Saul gathered all Israel together, and they pitched in Gilboa. When Saul saw the host of the Philistines, he was afraid, and his heart greatly trembled. And when Saul inquired of the Lord answered him not, neither by dreams, nor by Urim, nor by prophets. So we go back and what Saul had put away those that had familiar spirits. What's it mean by put away? Killed so many of them. Just put them away. Said, hey, enough of this. And Saul inquired in verse 6 of the Lord. The Lord didn't answer. The Lord, then the prophets. Did God even speak to the prophets? Now, Saul gets so desperate. Is he in his right mind? I don't know, but I know one thing. He's in great fear. He's in great, great fear. Verse 7, it says, Saul, your servant seek me a woman that hath a familiar spirit, a medium. It's wild how it says a familiar spirit. You know, Satan always has a copy. Someone who brings forth his tongues and says that I am of God, but their ways are wicked. And that's what you get into right here. They're Satanists. I mean, that's just the only way you can put it. They're not of the way of God. He says, that I may go to her and inquire of her. And the servant said to him, behold, there is a woman that hath a familiar spirit at a door. Nobody said to Saul, don't do this. You've already put away so many, but here he goes. And Saul disguised himself and put on other raiment. And he went, and 2 men with him. And they came to the woman by night. And he said, I pray thee, divine unto me by the familiar spirit, and bring me him up. So, looking over at, he says, please conduct a seance. Please do a seance for me, and bring up for me who's he want, who I'm going to name unto you. And the woman said unto him, behold, thou knowest what Saul hath done, how he hath cut off those that have familiar spirits, and the wizards out of the land. Wherefore then layest thou a snare for my life to cause me to die? And Saul swore to her by the Lord, saying, as the Lord liveth, there shall no punishment happen to me for this thing. Boy, desperation right there. Desperation. You know what he should have been doing? If he was in his right mind, he should have been sackcloth and ashes. He should have been pleading and begging for God to help him. He had no more prophets to come tell him what God had told him. He didn't have Samuel anymore. You know what? He didn't have God by his side. He wasn't looking forward. He was looking to grasp a hold of anything. Anything. Then said the woman, verse 11, who shall I bring up unto thee? It says, and he said, bring me up Samuel. And you know, I thought about this many times, and we'll look over at verse 16 real quickly. And it says, then said Samuel, wherefore then dost thou ask of me? Now, is it actually Samuel? And I know everybody has different opinions, and that's okay. I truly believe, and like I said, everybody can think different. I believe God allowed Samuel to come up or come down from that moment. That's just my belief. And I have no way of saying yay 100% or not, but that's just my belief. So what was that? 17. Got that far?
He spent the weeks
I skipped over to 16 for just a second.
Yeah.
Okay, verse 11, then said the woman, whom shall I bring up unto thee? And he said, bring me up Samuel. And when the woman saw Samuel, she cried with a loud voice, and the woman spake to Saul, saying, why hast thou deceived me? For thou art Saul. And the king said unto her, be not afraid, for what sawest thou? And the woman said unto Saul, I saw gods, it's a small g, ascending out of the earth. Now, as small gods, the spirits. Now, what she saw, little g right there. And what's it say? For I sawest thou ascending out of the earth, out of the earth. To me, that's totally not of God. Verse 14 said unto her, what form is he of? And she said, an old man cometh up, and he is covered with a mantle, and Saul perceived that it was Samuel. Now this is where I say, I think, don't know, can't prove. And he stooped with his face to the ground and bowed himself. And Samuel said to Saul, why hast thou disquieted me to bring me up? And Saul answered, I am sore distressed, for the Philistines make war against me, and God has departed from me, and answereth me no more, neither by prophets nor by dreams. Therefore I have called thee, that thou mayest make known unto me what I shall do. So was it not? What's your opinions? I don't know. Don't know. But, I meant to bring this up in invitation before Saul consulted the meeting for verse 7. Necromancy was strictly forbidden by the law of Moses, over Leviticus 19. Although Saul had instituted a purge against all forms of spiritism, apparently the spiritist medium had escaped previous notice. She kind of slid through. And I want to look back at verse 11 and 12. I totally skipped over. It says to bring up the dead was common terminology used by the necromancers of the ancient areas for bringing back the spirit of the deceased so as to gain information from him. I've watched stuff about this, and it is scary. It is absolutely scary to think that this could happen. It's totally ungodly. Saul was at that place at one point. Do away with them. Get them out of here. Kill them. Whatever. Get them out of here. And it says, accordingly, the term does not necessarily point to Sheol as a common receptacle in the earth of all disembodied spirits, good or bad, is sometimes taught. The appearance of Samuel has been explained by conservative theologians as either a hoax, a demonic impersonation of Samuel, or as a genuine appearance of the prophet. Whatever view one holds, certainly God, not the spiritist witch of Endor, controlled the circumstances and utilized them to announce Saul's imminent demise at the hands of the Philistines. That's a tough one. I don't know. To me, it neither matters. Could have been either way. But anyway, if it was not Samuel, the truth was told for one thing. And it says, like I read in verse 16, we'll skip to verse 17, the Lord hath done to him as he spake by me, for the Lord hath rent the kingdom out of thine hand and given it to thy neighbor, even to David, because thou obeyest not the voice of the Lord, nor executest his fierce wrath on Amalek. Therefore hath the Lord done this thing unto thee this day. I got this circled from a long time past, this verse 19. Moreover, the Lord will also deliver Israel with thee into the hand of the Philistines, and tomorrow shalt thou and thy sons be with me. The Lord also shall deliver the host of Israel into the hand of the Philistines. I've had that circled for a long, long time. Just how far it seems how many families were destroyed by him going to this one woman, someone he abhorred at one time and hated every mention of even their ways. And all of a sudden he falls into that snare. It's always a snare, always. In verse 20, I'm almost done. Then Saul fell straightway all alone on the earth, and he was sore afraid because of the words of Samuel. There was no strength in him, for he had eaten no bread all the day, nor all the night. And the woman came unto Saul, and saw that he was sore troubled, and said unto him, Behold, thy handmaid hath obeyed thy voice, and I have put my life in my hand, and have hearkened unto thy words which thou spakest unto me. Now therefore, I pray thee, hearken thou also unto the voice of thine handmaid, and let me set a morsel of bread before thee, and eat, that thou mayest have strength when thou goest on thy way. He shouldn't have partaken of that evil bread. He shouldn't have partaken of it, no matter how weak he was. This is a different thing of David taking bread, the shoe bread. This is taken of an evil hand. In verse 23, but he refused and said, I will not eat. But his servants together with the woman compelled him. He hearkened unto their voice, so he arose from the earth and sat upon the bed. And the woman had a fat calf in the house, and she hastily killed it, and took flour and kneaded it, and did bake unleavened bread thereof. And she brought it before Saul and before his servants, and they did eat. Then they rose up and went away that night. I think that's all it seems like that's all I do is just read it. I apologize for that, but
No, you've done a good job.
I know it's just a lot of reading, but when I went back over today in chapter 31, and I thought how sad and how tragic thing over in chapter 21, the death of Saul and his sons. You know, and there was Jonathan, and there was his brothers. They all went down. And you know what? Saul had to see all this. Saul had to see his own sons perish. I just wonder in his mind right then, I brought this upon my own children. I wonder if he thought that for 1 second. But I knew at that last point, when he said, run the spirit through me, run my sword right through me. The one that had enough wisdom, his armor bearer said, no, I'm not going to do that thing. Him crying, saying, have mercy, kill me, just take my life because I can't do it. No, I'm not going to do it. David wouldn't have done it either. David wouldn't have done it because he had every chance in the world, and David would have been there as his armor bearer. He wouldn't have taken Saul's life. Armor bearer himself took his own life. Because he knew what was coming. It was going to be rough.
I've got a question.
Yes, sir.
You were saying you didn't know if it was Saul, Samuel, or it wasn't, this and that. Why would the God move upon men to write this down, pen this down? He could have said, someone, whatever. No, he called Samuel by name.
Like I read that one annotation, I mean, some say it wasn't, it was demonic.
Well, if you think about it, there's 3 aspects that jump out to me. Number one, the woman screamed. She didn't expect it to work. See, all that's always been, has been a hoax. And here all of a sudden it worked. And the terminology that they all used in that time, the necromancers of that time, was gods when they see spirits coming, or when they claim to see spirits, they call them gods. And then, saying it came up from the earth, and then thinking, well, how could Samuel come up with it? But you got to remember, this is pre-Christ.
Yep.
So Samuel, when he passed away, when he died, he went to the heart of the earth. He didn't go to heaven.
Yep.
He went to paradise. So he had to come up out of the earth. So when she said, I saw gods, I believe she just saw Samuel coming up out of the earth. But I believe God, nonetheless, God did it. It wouldn't hurt. God did it for Saul's purpose. Because when that aspect of her screaming made me think, she didn't expect it to work, and all of a sudden she was shut. It caught her by surprise.
So you believe it was
I believe it was Samuel, but I believe it was all the Lord doing all the work. It wasn't her. It wasn't nothing she could do. She had no power. It was God that done it.
I've had a lot of people tell me, I don't believe it's Samuel. But if you look in the Old Testament, bringing the dead back,
Mhm.
and there's people who do it still today. That's not just Old Testament. I don't want anything.
I believe they're seeing an imitation. I believe anything that is disembodied spiritual wise
Yeah.
is to say, let's say you wanted to go to a medium or you want to go to one of these soothsayers, whatever you want to call them today, and say, I want to speak to my dead grandpa, or I want to speak to this person or that person. I believe it's Satan sending an invitation to give you what you want, just to confuse your mind on what to believe, what not to believe, and to take part in a lot of these things. If he can prove it to be true to you, and there's a lot of people believe it. I mean, just absolutely will spend a lot of money after these things and speak to these mediums. But I believe Satan's always had a copy. That voice of somebody speaking that you think's your grandpa speaking to you, I believe it's demonic. Every bit of it's demonic and not of God.
I tell you what,
It's scary.
Christian,
Mm-hmm.
any Christian who thinks I can take on Satan, within themselves, I'm telling
Mm-hmm.
you, that's foolishness. I mean, that is foolishness.
Absolutely.
People say I can take on demons, that's foolishness.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's some close people today who try to help people earnestly and to try and cast out demons from people, exorcism. And to sit there and say, can you do it just like that?
Mm-hmm.
No. I mean, there's times it takes months and months.
Prayer, fasting.
Right. So, I mean, without God, those things are impossible. I mean, in the name of Christ, Jesus is powerful. And we know that, and I brought it up many times at that last day.
Mm-hmm.
Lord, have we not cast out demons in thy name? That's how powerful Jesus' name is. They fear and tremble. That won't be enough. Because name wasn't found in the book of life. Never knew you. Look how many friends we may have go by our loved ones. Ever think about that?
Mm-hmm.
That God will look at and say, I never knew you. This is a bad thing here.
Mm-hmm.
It's a bad thing. I held my grandbaby and I said, Lord Jesus, please, that this young has got ahead of her. I said, just use her. Some kind of way. Some kind of way. If you think things have progressed so much in the last, let's just say 5 years. Let's just say the past 5 years. It's going to move at a speedier rate. What was 10 years, now it's going 5 years. What's 5? What's it going to be in the next 2? What's my grandbaby? What's your grandchildren? What are they going to see? What are they going to be taught?
Yeah. We was, sort of